In today's video with the professor, you'll be hopefully helped along the stages and the factors that go into starting a business, how you can think about your own business and what exactly is needed to be successful. You yourself can be a business monster if you do the right things, make enough right decisions and hope for a bit of luck. It won't be as powerful as the business insights of the secrets of the pharaohs, but it'll be something hopefully that'll allow you to bypass business school and give you some of the tools needed to be successful from a knowledge standpoint. This will not be a substitute for the hard work. Most entrepreneurs, business owners, anyone who's actually involved with a sole trader or small family business, things like that, is always going to have the gumption required to be successful in a lot of ways. It does require a certain type of person, but it's also a matter of making good decisions, and good decisions can come from having the most amount of information and skills and tools to adapt to the changing constellation of variables that go into what is life, but what is specifically business life. This is not to say you need to be a baron of business, one of those real estate magnates or something like this, but it's to say that you can yourself become very competent and ideally be self-dependent in the realm of both operating a business and making money, hopefully enriching yourself and making yourself happy by sheer will, basically, of being your own boss. Now, you can go to business school. I wouldn't necessarily advocate against such a thing, but most people who run successful businesses probably did not go to business school and they went to the School of Hard Knocks or some other nonsense. But in general, they learnt much more by doing rather than by, say, reading or learning, which is a surefire way to get yourself in trouble if you don't do any reading. So there is a balance there. I would not necessarily say that you should rely too heavily on either. Being too theoretical is never going to be helpful. All of these strategy courses at university will not teach you how to encounter and deal with real life strategic decisions in business. And at the same time, trying to solve problems with an incorrect and ill-performing heuristic will also not allow you to be maximizing what is probably your potential and at least your business performance. Now, there are a few things I'll go through here, and so hopefully they can enlighten you in its totality, where we go through what a business does, how it functions, why you would want to start a business perhaps, but also the necessary requirements around both business as a function and positioning, but also the required processes that are manifestly required by a successful business. So starting, I think, anywhere is fine, but I like to start with the product. It's the thing that you'll be selling. Now, the product is going to be determining how you probably go to market. And so it's fairly important that you understand what you're trying to sell to someone else. Is this a service? Is it a good? Is it some combination? What is it about the value proposition that you have? Now, for me, I think it's fairly evident that you can find a lot of good and quality ideas just around you. And this is to say you should tap into that knowledge domain of your own and conduit it between what is something you might almost call a passion, but something that gives you energy versus something that is a bit more laborious, let's say. So if there's something that you don't find inherently thrilling, I would try and avoid that as your choice of product or service. It will just allow you to burn out much quicker and peter out in terms of your enthusiasm versus something not necessarily that you love or as a passion, but it's something that you find interesting and complex and would like to provide to the world. So the idea of a good, this could be anything from a dice manufacturing, 3D printer assembly, and for a service, it could be anything from door dashing someone's meal to their house, but in general, a business which can harness a service, not necessarily a product in that way. One, which is the good here, usually is scalable to a much higher degree than a service. Service usually is time restricted. It requires your own time to service the customer, whereas the good and product is a little bit more flexible with how you go about scaling. I would say that service can be very, very beneficial if you have a very specific and lucrative skill set. This can be something like legal or tax or some sort of knowledge basis, which allows for you to charge very high rates for your time. Alternatively, goods have a much more dynamic process around selling and also much more competitive, particularly if you're looking at very low-level consumer goods that are manufactured in China, say, where there's many types of different competitors. But we can save maybe some of that discussion for a later part. Now, the idea behind products and or services, anything you're trying to sell, it relates probably into technology. It's to enhance life in general. And technology can be thought of in this very basic way that anything is an improvement or an innovation. It is this gaining of or expansion of what exists, and it's usually either better, faster, cheaper, or you can get it more often. These are really the four domains about what you can think about products and services from an innovative standpoint. So if you position your product to be one of these things, and that can even be maybe commoditized, so maybe you're selling the exact same thing, but you're selling it in a better way, a much more convenient way, or just a more sexy, exciting way. It can be anything like that, but in general, it's easy to think about these things with a much more strict lens on what works and what doesn't. So something that's better, something that is faster, something maybe that's cheaper, or something that is provided more often. These are always the good signals for that, whether it's a beneficial product or good, and how you can think about selling it. If you're not inculcated into how businesses operate, then hopefully I can provide a little bit of guideline here. So in general, companies are administered top down in a hierarchical function, and then outwards in an umbrella. You'll get a lot of different functions in very large businesses, which we will not find in a sole trader, single proprietor business. But I think you should think of all of these things as functions in general, which require some process and or job and or project required to address them. So they are necessary. They're just not always necessarily a job or a role, where if you have a large company, the resource constraints are less limited. And so you can feel fine with employing somebody to do your recruiting or your legal documentation or your tax accounting, something like this. So do generally think of businesses as being complex, intertwined webs, but they can be decipherable in ways that you can allow yourself not to be overloaded with all this information when you're trying to start your own business. It is not hopefully too confronting for you. There shouldn't be this overwhelming feeling. There are a lot of auxiliary factors, but they remain auxiliary. There's basically no substitute for good decision making and hard work, though. These are two kind of musts, desiderata, I should say. So you have administrative functions. These just will typically be around pushing paperwork and pencils, but a lot of the time administration is a good way of collecting, keeping documentation, making sure things are known throughout the business or to customers, to vendors, anyone who's an agent or a distributor of your goods, something like this, all requires administration or requires someone saying yes, no to decisions. You'll have these administrative functions. The very highest level is obviously the chief executive officer, and then the lowest level is probably your low-level bureaucrat. The human resource department, typically responsive and responsible for hiring, firing, and perspiring, but also inter-company, say, management of personnel. And so, as the name dictates, human resources, we think of humans as a resource, it's labor. Having to deal with them requires its department at a big enough company. It can be very beneficial if you are at scale to start to employ someone in these departments to do your hiring for you rather than outsourcing hiring or doing it yourself. So that's more or less the function of that department. It can be critical to a tertiary, maybe a secondary degree, but never a primary degree. Which is to say that all good businesses are built off the backs of good people. So hiring very good people is, I'd say, very necessary and should be at the forefront of your mind when it comes to who you want to work with every day for, say, 70 hours a week if you're starting your own startup, or 40 hours a week if you're just managing what is a normal full-time business job. So HR will never be able to, there's a maxim around this basically, but they will never be able to hire A+ employees if they are not themselves A+. So when you have someone who's in charge of hiring, let's say, and we can classify them as a C level or a B employee, they can usually only hire at their own level and below when, say, identifying talent requires talent. So do be careful and mindful with that. Finance and accounting can be very, very important. Obviously, you want to be compliant with regulatory requirements. And this is to say accounting has two functions. One is recording and maintaining certain levels of performance. And then also one is looking into the future, making sure you're planning for expenses and costs and hopefully getting a good idea of what revenues you're likely to receive based on what is either historicals or promises to pay or in general certain business functioning forecast. So this is usually called FP&A, financial planning and advisory, but you can have many different functions that sit within finance and accounts. But typically it's to make sure that bills are paid, you have accounts receivable, accounts payable, that happens duly and on time, that no one's asking you for a bill, and you're also not having to beg and borrow money because you're missing your cash and your cash flows are not consistent with how the business operates. This can be very, very important when you're dealing with businesses which rely quite heavily on free cash flows to pay bills because you obviously want to have your cash account maintained to a degree where you feel comfort and there's no material bills which will put you under more as insolvent for this in this case. So maintaining a certain level of, I would say, skill set in finance is very important, even for those who would consider themselves not finance people. It's to say you should still know how a P&L works. Maybe less so a balance sheet and a cash flow statement, but in general, I would advocate that you understand how revenue comes in, out the end profits, ideally dispersed. So that is a really core function that you can probably do with a lighter touch at a smaller business, and when you scale your business, you would increase headcount there. Marketing, the pretty lipstick on the sales pig, you would say it's to entice and or build brand awareness and or generate leads. Typically, marketing can be seen as two things, and the way I try to view marketing is, in general, a reflection of the expectations of what is attracting somebody's eyeballs to something. Marketing will never understand why they do what they do from a holistic perspective. No one who works in marketing is ever a good business person, almost as a rule. Marketing agencies are usually poorly run businesses because they're owned and run by marketers. And marketing in general requires a skill set that's not always congruent to good business activity. You have creative types, you have cool types, you have this aura around how do you want to say socially and skillfully deploy what is business charisma. This is a very difficult thing to do in a soft skill way and not necessarily a hard skill. So your nerdy types will disdain and abhor this sort of activity because they feel it is probably beneath them in a lot of ways, but it's probably more something like adjacent. There's a rule of thumb with startups that you should have a hipster, hustler, and a hacker. This is what the hipster is. It's someone who's a bit more creative and deals with people. Marketing in general is one of those domains where the skill set probably errs towards soft skills, and that university is probably fine if you were choosing to be a marketer, but it's also not necessary. I would hire someone in marketing if they were out of high school, as long as they had the talent for something like digital design or running ad campaigns on Google or LinkedIn, which is a fairly basic, I think, skill set. So this goes into, though, how you target. And so when I spoke before about go-to-market, this is what you're starting to talk about. It's that you have this product or service of yours. How do I launch it into the market? How do I get people to know about it? This is all marketing. You ringing on the phone to a potential customer is sales, but the idea that you have a website which can be clicked on and should be promoted with advertising or any sort of measures is all marketing. So you have an interface here with the marketing and then to the sales team. They work, I would say, nice in a synergistic way, that one should feed into the other, and then the feedback loop should be do more of this or do less of this to the marketing team so that they modulate their approach to find a good middle ground. You'll find in small businesses, this is typically a combined exercise of a salesperson who is maybe pre-sales, business development, which has a lot of marketing elements in it, or if you have a very strong marketing growth marketer, something like that, where they go the other way and deliver sales leads quite strongly into the sales team. But in general, I would try and approach sales and marketing with this idea that you are the face of the company. It's the front office, so to speak, and that you were trying to generate interest and then convince someone to buy what it is that you are selling. This is why someone who is a swindler or a huckster has a natural sales personality and disposition, because they're good at marketing themselves. It's why you can get Ponzi schemes, as because the guys aren't good at finance, but they are good at selling. And there's a lot of jobs which will reward you for selling, but no job is as rewarding, I think, as a job for yourself in which you're good at selling what you are building and producing. So if you are a good salesman and not a more naughty misanthropic type, then you should rely heavily on that skill set. It's fairly rare, but being good at sales, good at marketing, these are very core soft skills for a business, and that most businesses won't succeed without some form of competency in the marketing and sales department. Sales itself is very specific. You are in charge of generating revenue. That is the be-all and end-all, probably the most important part of the company other than product. So you make the product. It could be software. It could be a physical product. It could be a service, and you sell it, and that's through sales. So that's why it just is that primacy function. The IT department can be often overlooked or maybe overdone sometimes, but most often you will use a lot of different IT services. You'll interact with a lot of vendors when it comes to your IT requirements. There can just be a lot of efficiency gains from using good software correctly. I won't advocate for drowning you yourself or your team in a lot of different types of software, but you'll not want to lose internet connectivity. You'll want a functional email website. So these things all become of quite a high level of importance. And so this cannot be overlooked and should not probably be delayed too much after starting your business or expanding the team. Research and development, and this goes into the hacker, but someone who is in charge of developing the product service in a way that's making it differentiated, competitive. This can be very difficult, very simple. It depends. I think if you rely, say, heavily on AI with someone who's got an edge there, maybe that's slightly more efficient than if you're developing a tangible hardware good, which can be a lot of engineering time and sunk costs on faulty prototypes, etc. So be very mindful and circumspect with which type of product you're choosing. Hardware in general is a laborious and time-consuming process, but gives you quite a strong competitive edge because hardware can be innovative directly. You can have an improved version of a product. This goes slightly into software, and then services are a bit more commoditized in general, so you'll need a bit more of a differentiating factor to that. It can be something where you develop people into being good service providers. There can be an element to it. So it is just about the product. A lot of the times the advice is going to be generic in general, because once your product is very specific, it requires specific advice. But hopefully you can maintain a certain level of coherence around what's needed from making this a better version of our competitors' existing offering. The customer service department is probably a function that's secondary. It's after you've acquired customers. You want them to be satisfied and or hear their complaints and or address their concerns. So you'll need someone to do that. It's a very low level task, not unimportant, but also not requiring too much skill. So you can think of that as maybe this: once you've scaled to a level and sufficient clientele requirements have been built, then they will have a flow through effect of needs, and this can go into your customer service team. You can also in charge them with things like crossing and upselling. So existing customers who aren't managed by a key account manager can then provide value, and this can be in certain ways around offering extra products or fulfilling other needs that they might have that you can fix and sell. Then you have the legal department, and once again, probably of secondary importance, even though some of the output they have is of primacy. It's to say you want to incorporate your business properly in the proper jurisdiction, abide by all these compliance and regulatory requirements, but at the same time, you don't need it at the start. You want to pay a lawyer who doesn't work for you to just do all the documentation, and then you want to start building and selling your product. Those are the two primary functions of yourself as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, whatever it is, you're starting your own company. You say, like, I need to build this product, I need to sell it. Everything else is downstream of this, and we can fix as we go. Don't leave some things too late, because you will find that there'll be a comeuppance and that'll be a retribution you won't want to suffer. But otherwise, I think it's a fairly good way to go about understanding the core requirements and what are the auxiliary requirements around starting a business. It does allow you starting a business, particularly software and hardware businesses in the tech industry, to come to grips with what is an outsized risk return profile. So if you take large risks like this, you are actually probably throwing your hat into an arena of large rewards. It's not to say you were guaranteed anything, in a mismanagement of fundraising or a cap table or equity structures can always leave you in the lurch when it comes to capitalization on your actual success. But in general, if you think of most billionaires were guys who started their own businesses in tech, and that's because the risk profile is quite high, but the reward profile can be even higher. You can have growth and scale, which outgrows basically your own efforts into the business. So having a really good idea at the right time is often enough, as long as you can execute in a sufficient manner. And so execution here is probably something you can control. The product design is something you can control. So 2 out of the 3 elements to great success is better than if you have this idea of risk minimization of working at the same company for 40 years and then hoping for something to happen, which will never happen. And that's why I think starting a business is probably personal and obviously adjusted to your risk profile. But if you need the encouragement, I think you should do it. You'll do it regardless of what I say, but hopefully I can de-risk some of the fears that you might have on this. It gives you a chance to build something. I think there's always more satisfaction in building and promoting yourself and your own ideas, your own ego in that way. It's really beneficial for your soul. Why you would want to pick hardware or software or service, I think in general, my advice to you is probably, if you're inclined technologically, that you pick a very niche hardware if you're a physical, tangible guy, someone who likes, say, fixing cars or making robots. But otherwise, you pick software. You can always employ software engineers if you just have an idea, so they can build it for you with some capital infusion. They just say, I'll pay these 2 software engineers for 3 months of their time. They can build me something, and then we can see if we can sell it. That's a much more structured go-to-market setup and design process than historically. If you think, okay, I'll set up a HVAC company. Well, first you'll need to be qualified in HVAC or plumbing, or it could be anything at landscaping. And then you'll need to pay for all the tools and the equipment, and then you'll need to do a lot of sourcing or recruiting for other guys to come and join your team to expand the business. So no matter what you pick, it will be something where if you want, say, medium returns, then you pick the medium risk businesses, and that would be those physical, maybe labor or setting up a consumer goods store or a B2B distribution of something like car parts. These can all be viable business trajectories, and even owning, say, a real estate company or a car sales company. These are all good chances of success, but you'll also probably only face medium-sized returns from that. So it's to say, like, you'll probably be very comfortable, but you'll not be Bill Gates rich, which is fine. I mean, no one needs to start off thinking they're going to be Bill Gates rich, but you just have to be realistic with the return profile of the venture that you're going into is always going to be a reflection of the product and the scalability of what you're trying to do. So if you're going out there trying to make a very niche product, then probably expect niche returns. If you're going to try and commoditize something that's scalable, then maybe you'll see some influx of what is many millions of customers. So it really just does depend. But I think in general, have that in your forefront of your mind when picking what product and services. How well can I sell this, and who will I sell this to? What's my market? What's my key purchasing criteria from a customer perspective? Really try to understand what a customer wants and needs, and then match that with your idea of what this product should be. This probably goes a little bit into how you can design a competitive advantage versus a first mover or a sustained advantage. This idea that you can start to ascribe certain values to a product and a service. So how do I price my product? If it's software, you can look at maybe something else in the market that's similar. If it's hardware, it should be much easier to look at what a competitor offers and then just either be cheaper or be first to a new version of that product, slightly edge it out. It's to say you could release an iPhone before anyone else has got what you're offering, and therefore charge whatever ridiculous amount you want. Or you can come with a Samsung Galaxy version 53 or whatever they're up to, which is the commoditized version of a touchscreen smartphone, and then you can just charge probably what is the going rate of a smartphone in the market rather than necessarily the higher higher end. But you hopefully understand what I'm saying here. And this is what goes into this function of technology to product to sales, revenue, operations, organization, investors. So there is a process by which everything flows, and it's necessitated by the setup. The structure of a business is not random. As I said before, these are all tasks which culminate from the activities of a business. So doing these things generates these processes and these requirements, and then roles are designed around fixing these things. The roles can start to be very specific and skill-based. So having someone who's very good at accounting will require you to hire someone for more money than someone who can just package a box and ship it out. It requires very little skill, and therefore how you're paying people is going to be relative to the amount of skill you hope that they possess. This is why when you're starting your own business, it's best to be as skilled as possible so that you can tackle all those high required tasks as best you can, because it's cheaper than if you had to hire someone, and that you can then hopefully employ what are more, we could say, pecuniary minded resources. So people who maybe don't bring as much skill but offer outsized value. If I can get someone to be driving around my parcels for $20 an hour, and I can charge that service at $2,000 an hour, you can start to see how the accumulation of returns can happen quite quickly. And I just keep adding drivers to my business, and I'll keep adding the differentiated value between what I pay the actual resource and the truck costs, etc., with what I can charge to a customer and clients. So as I say, this is how we can start to hopefully cross-stitch what is our knowledge of different parts of starting a business, operating a business, selling, making sure we're maintaining certain operational efficiencies. And over time, you'll start to have bloat. All organizations have to suffer through this because the required roles are not always encapsulated one-to-one with the skill sets that you hire for. So because you need finance doesn't mean hiring one person will be sufficient, and that person has all the skills to deal with every requirement in that division. So you'll end up needing 2, 3, 4 people, but then if you've hired 4 people to do 4 different roles, not every role will have a full-time equivalent task, which is to say that 37.5 hours a week may be too much for one person, but you can't get rid of them because they fulfill a specific task that they have the skill for that you can't outsource. So you will find that this bloat grows and prodigiously so in larger organizations, say like Amazon and Walmart and some of the largest employee and employers in the world, like governments. Now, it's also important to know what doesn't work. I think it's probably best I introduce you to a few of the common, we say like misconceptions around your own practices in business, but also just ignorance in a lot of the time. So and this is the most common reason startups fail. A startup is just a company which typically aligns itself to the technology industry, but it can be any type of business really failing for the same reasons. As I said before, owning a tennis shoe store or a HVAC servicing company may suffer the same things around product market fit. And that is the most common. So making sure that you actually are just selling something that the market wants. This can be delicate because sometimes you can sell to an unsuspecting market something they don't know they want yet. So you've introduced a new product that they'll actually like after they use it. But all of these things require you to be very strategic with how you go to market. You have to, once again, align yourself with an incentivization profile of a customer, the stakeholder. Who is it? What's the buyer persona that I'm trying to target? And how can I get and communicate to them their need for my product and my service in that way? And so most things can be felt as if they are good products but mistimed, or good products but the wrong market. It's maybe a bit of a fundamental misunderstanding with what you think is a good product versus what the market needs. And so being very certain around like, okay, if we're going to market with a slightly better version of what exists, that's actually probably a good start to knowing that the market is ready for our product. And so success is more determined on how well we sell, how good are my marketeers in terms of generating clicks and views, and then how good are my sales guys at executing and closing deals. Insufficient funding. This can be down to 2 things, probably mismanagement of funds allocation. A lot of the times people will underassume how much it costs to start a business and do certain things. There's always permits, regulatory requirements. There are just a lot of small bills which will accumulate to you if you're your own business owner without big overhead charges like office and IT equipment, you will just start to have to suffer through a lot of governmental bills and requirements, but also small things like if you're setting up payment systems, there's bills. If there's services around software that you're using, all these sort of things all require certain small payments all the time. And they will start to see a decrease in your cash balance if you don't have a corresponding increase in your revenues from customers that you've been winning. The wrong people on the team goes back to picking a winning team requires A+ people. If you're not probably sure that you're an A+ person, it may not be wise to start a business that you're trying to scale with many, many people and you just do the sole trader or a smaller business. If you're an A+ person, this is what you most find in, say, those Silicon Valley style startups, is you have a really type A personality driven people who are trying to do these incredible things all the time, is that they attract the same-ish style, but then you have to be much more wary about ethical concerns of some people have no compunction around backstabbing you and ripping you off. So you have a lot of much more lascivious or capricious-minded people. Not surviving competition, once again, probably goes a lot into the misalignment of the product here. Competition is natural. It's an element to most markets. Anytime you start something new, you'll have competition in some way. There's very few greenfield products where you go, I'll launch something that no one's ever seen before. It's just more of a matter of understanding what the market looks like from the competitors are under penetrated, or they're perhaps not equipped to deal with how we do business, and thus you can be the winner. The internet spawned probably the last great gasp of new greenfield businesses, and we'll see maybe going forward something new do that too. Then I think we can go into something around pricing. Pricing can be difficult. Knowing what a price point is effective, you have to have an understanding of unit economics. Unit economics is a very fancy way of saying the per product sale price is scalable to a degree that you'll be profitable eventually, and how soon you will be profitable is reflected in how well your unit economics are structured. And so if you charge too much, you'll get no customers. If you offer something like a discounted rate, which then scales back over time, particularly around software, where you'll have a recurring revenue, someone signs a contract for 5 years, then you know you can bank on having that much revenue every year. And then after that 5 years, you can hope to upsell them or charge them what is the normal going rate. And so you can improve your unit economics that way. You can typically find a lot of software businesses transition out of licensing into contracts, particularly around a recurring business model. And this is why, because you can much more predict both the unit economics on a per sale, per customer basis, but also long-term financial prospects of a business. Hardware is very important to understand your required input costs and the totality of the cost to the business to be able to serve certain things. Having a gross margin requirement around hardware is very, very important. And then lastly, with services, you typically need to know how much someone is costing you per hour, and then transforming your business model to reflect quite a favorable rate of charging that person out at, so that you can earn a profit and capture the economic difference. This can go maybe into the last type of, I'd say, common business model, which is around transaction-based or freemium even, where you're trying to attract someone to buy something from you, maybe online. So you offer them the free version of the product and then hope that they upgrade to the full paid for version, or you're trying to make them buy a lot. And this can be something like a mobile game where you can buy someone hoping to buy a pack of 10 gems, and that costs $1. And then you just hope that they engage so much that they'll continue to buy those pack of gems. And this transactional based business model is super effective when you can maybe understand psychologically someone's business profile. Then I think we probably will round out just by showing you the new market and how you can start to think of going first. So if you're able to move into a new neighborhood where there's no electrical servicing company, that's quite a good advantage. You're the first one there. You're the one with the van that helps everyone set up all that electricity in that little neighborhood. That's going to give you a huge advantage from a business perspective. You can monopolize that small geographical market potentially by expanding your business to service every single need. And you can calculate maybe per household, their requirements around an electrician might be once every year. So you'll need 365 houses to have one service call every day. And so you can sort of build this mental maths into a back of the envelope business model. And then we say like, okay, so if there's a first mover advantage, then there must be some other advantage that someone who's second, and that's just to be better. So you can learn from the first mover's mistakes for free, which is very, very beneficial from a business standpoint, because then you're able to show and demonstrate exactly how a value added product can be delivered without having to go through the R&D and the costs before. Because I mean, ultimately for me, it was to impart to you some of this understanding that a business needs to be sustainable and scalable if you want to reap the untraditional, like the long tail reward here. And delivering this product in a way that firstly is desirous and beneficial to you personally. You can become a good business owner and operator. It fulfills that need in your soul to be a builder and to supply the world with whatever it is that you feel passionate or semi-passionate about. And then I think it's to say you want to be smart about it, because success is just better than failure. Setting yourself up for success is very important, and you can do that by making these good decisions based on the knowledge that hopefully I've imparted and other people may have given you. Then thirdly, I think you want it to be scalable. That's picking a business product, a type, and also a business model and a market which just enables you to be hyper successful. It's to say you don't want to hamstring yourself unnecessarily by your choices that you've made previous to actually going to market, selling your product, and then trying to scale your business. If you have any questions or anything related to that, I'm happy to cover a part 2 here. But in general, I hope that this is going to give you and impose upon you some maybe thought and a thought experiment about your own business if you're currently a business owner, or if you wanted to start your own startup. It gives you a bit of a seed maybe around certain ideas of what would work and what wouldn't work. But ultimately, and this is my final kind of call for your destiny here, is to say, if you are the Faustian with that pull to infinite, software is probably your best bet. Find or pair with a genius engineer who's able to maybe build a product, or if you are that one, pair with someone who's able to sell it in a way that will enable you to become the next, say, Elon or Bill Gates, where you have this transformational wealth generation from I created this and I can sell it to the world.